We're going to add the footer using a Rails facility called a partial. So let's get started by using partials to clean up this application layout, which is getting a little messy. There it is. So a partial is a way of taking some HTML or embedded Ruby and sticking it in a file by itself, and then we can render the partial on another page. So for one, it's a way to reuse that HTML. We're actually not going to use it for that purpose right now. We're just going to use it to clean things up. So let's take a look at this. I just want to get rid of this. This is called an HTML shim. That's a term from carpentry. It's a thin little wedge of wood. It's used in other industrial contexts, and it's come to mean a little piece of software that sits between two things. In this case, the shim is making our application more compatible with older browsers. But for some reason, people have taken to using the word shiv interchangeably with shim, and shiv is a completely different thing. A shiv is a weapon typically associated with prisons. So I'm going to name my partial shim instead of shiv because that's what makes sense. So the way to create a partial is this requires creating a file. I can do this here. And I'm going to call this shim.html.erb. And in order to indicate that it's a partial, I'm going to prepend an underscore. So this is a file convention. If you see an underscore on an HTML ERB file, it's a partial. And the way that we can use that partial here on the application layout is by rendering it using embedded Ruby, using the render method. And then we just say where it is. It's in layouts, shim. Save that. So you can see here that the location is relative to the views. So Rails knows it's in the views, and then you do layouts and then shim. Also notice that you do not put the underscore when you're rendering it. That's just a convention. Next, I want to put the header in a partial. So let's cut this, and it's going to look like this. This is a situation where you can save it and then verify that your tests are failing. You can see that there are 3 errors here, and that's because there is no header partial right now. Even though we're not specifically writing tests for this HTML structure, the tests are still useful to catch things like this. So remember the convention, underscore, and then whatever we want to call it is called header.html.erb. You can paste in the header, and I like to dedent it. This is just Shift-Tab. There we go. And there we go. Now our test suite is passing again. Of course, we can look in the browser too. Let's refresh it and make sure it's doing the same thing. And there we can see it's still working. So let's make a footer now. By the way, you can see that I'm putting these in the layouts directory. That's because these partials are really part of the layout. There's another convention which is to use a shared directory under views. We will be using some shared views, but for things that are shared across the layout, I like to use the layouts directory. So let's make a footer. Now that we know about partials, we can preemptively make it a partial. Remember what we want the footer to look like. Should have some links at the bottom here. Now I like to use the footer tag like this, but for Bootstrap we also need to give it a footer class. Let's see, I'm going to put this in the small tag. These are going to be small links here. This is just going to be small text here. So let's say let's do this. Just have a link to the Ruby on Rails tutorial. And then let's put a link to my page. And then let's have some nav links. This is the same tag we used for the header. Let's do an unordered list of list items. And okay, so what are these going to be? Let's just use the ones from here, about, contact, and then news. So about is going to be link to about. We don't have a route for that yet, so let's do that. Stub it out. You can just copy this. And let's do help. Actually, no, contact. We actually don't have a contact page unless you solved the exercise in lesson 3. So that's working. And then I want to have a link to the Rails tutorial news page. All right, save that, and it should be working. Because we haven't rendered it yet, so let's render the layout here, the layout footer. It's going to be after the content, but before the end of the container div. So let's do this. Layout slash footer. And let's see if that works. It should work. Aha, there we go. So it's here at the bottom. But you can see that it doesn't have any styling, so that indicates that we need to add some CSS. So I'm just going to copy that. Let's just copy the footer CSS here. By the way, you might have noticed that some of these generate commands, I guess in this case the static pages controller generate, actually generated a static pages.css.scss file. It turns out though it's really quite hard to tie everything together. So rather than trying to figure out how to get all the CSS to work, for this tutorial I'm just going to put everything in this one custom file. I really don't feel like with an application this small it's worth breaking it apart into separate files. But there is a way to do that if you need to. Let's paste this in. Let's take a look at what this is. So this is styling the footer tag here, this guy. So this is all styling the footer tag. So you can see that this CSS, this custom CSS, is styling the tag footer. The class footer is going to be styled by Bootstrap. In fact, it probably already has some styling. Yeah, so it's already inherited some styling from Bootstrap, I think. In any case, let's save this and refresh it. And there we go. There's a nice footer. Got the couple links here in the bottom left, and then some more navigation links about contact news. But you can click on these and you can see that the URL will change just to put that little stub in. But of course it doesn't go anywhere yet. At this point in real life I would probably make a commit, so let's just do that. I feel like we haven't made any commits yet. Set everything here and say by the way, you might have noticed I did -am here. This A is unnecessary because I just added everything in the previous line, but my fingers want to type this, so, and it doesn't do any harm because we've already added everything. There we go.